The range is ready to support, and weather is looking great. We are reporting a minimal possibility of weather-related launch constraints. So for now, while we wait for liftoff, let's take a moment to meet the vehicle that will be taking SXM-9 to orbit today. The two-stage Falcon 9 vehicle on your screen stands just about 229 feet tall. When it's fully fueled, it'll hold just over 1 million pounds of propellant, and we began loading those propellants on both stages of the vehicle at just about T-minus 35 minutes. SXM-9 is safely enclosed inside of that 17-foot diameter payload fairing, and that's the top portion or the nose of the rocket you can see there on your screen. This fairing is made of a carbon composite material, and the fairing protects the satellite on its way to orbit. The fairing is made up of two halves, and they are jettisoned approximately 3 minutes into flight. For today's mission, one of the fairing halves is flight-proven, flying for its 5th time, and the other half is also actually flight-proven, flying for its 3rd time today. Both sides of this fairing will be recovered after today's flight by our fairing recovery ship, Bob. Below that payload fairing, we do have the 2nd stage, and this is the part of the rocket that will take our payload to its destination orbit. The 2nd stage will ignite its single Merlin vacuum, or MVAC engine, just about 2.5 minutes into flight, and then we do relight that engine a 2nd time before we deploy the satellite. Below that 2nd stage, you can see the black interstage, which is part of the 1st stage booster. And at the bottom of the 1st stage, there are 9 Merlin engines, and these get Falcon 9 off the ground up into the thinner parts of the Earth's atmosphere. Shortly after liftoff, the 1st and 2nd stages will separate from one another, and then the 2nd stage will continue up to orbit, and while the 1st stage will make its way back down to Earth. The 1st stage, of course, is designed to be reflown with minimal refurbishments between flights. And as mentioned at the top of the show, today's booster is flying for the 19th time, and we will be attempting to land this booster on our drone ship. Just read the instructions. And that drone ship is currently stationed in the Atlantic Ocean. As you can see there on your screen, a nice view of that drone ship. And if we are successful in recovering the booster today, it will be the 121st successful recovery of an orbital class rocket in just this year alone. Now, lastly, that large truss structure you see next to the rocket is the transporter erector, or TE. We use it both to roll the rocket out to the pad, as well as raise it to its vertical launch position. You might hear in callouts over the nets the TE referred to as the strongback from the launch team.
Stage 1 RP1 load is complete.
And there we go, we just heard that Stage 1 RP1 loading has been wrapped up. That TE I was mentioning also routes the vehicle's fluids, power, and telemetry umbilicals from the ground systems up to the rocket and the satellite, all the way until the moment that Falcon 9 transitions to internal power. So now that you're a little more familiar with the vehicle, let's learn more about today's payload, SXM-9. We are now just at about T-minus 5 minutes from liftoff of Falcon 9 from Launch Complex 39A at Kennedy Space Center. At the point of liftoff, the transporter erector, or TE, will have retracted away to clear the path for Falcon 9's ascent. And in order
back lower has started.
In order to prepare for that retraction, we will see those clamp arms open around the base of the 2nd stage, and the TE will pull away from the rocket. So we just heard a call out for that over the nets, and you should see those clamp arms just below the fairing start to open up any second now. And there you go. As you can see, those arms are now opening up in preparation for TE retraction. So up until this point, the TE has been supporting the weight of the vehicle, but now that the vehicle is pressurized and mostly full of propellant, it can stand on its own weight. So we will now begin to retract that strong back away from the vehicle just slightly. And at this point in the countdown, both the first and second stages are nearly fully loaded with their 1 million pounds of kerosene fuel and liquid oxygen. And as you can see there on your screen, that strong back is now starting to lean away from the vehicle. These first and second stages began their propellant loading just at about T-minus 35 minutes, and they will wrap up about a minute apart from each other, with the first stage finishing just around T-minus 3 minutes, and the second stage wrapping up at around T-minus 2 minutes. You might notice a few of those white clouds around the vehicle. These are formed as the chilled gas above the LOX tank liquid surface vents overboard to maintain pressure inside of the tank. And when that cold gas contacts the warmer Florida air, it does condense the water in the air, and it forms those clouds that you see on your screen. And this is a totally normal part of
Stage 1 LOX load is complete.
There we go. We just heard stage 1 LOX loading has finished. Should be wrapping up stage 2 in around 40 seconds or so. Weather looking really nice here in Florida, mostly clear skies. Teams not reporting any blockers to launch at this point. Now coming up next at T-minus 60 seconds, Falcon 9 will enter the startup phase. And this means the rocket's autonomous internal flight computers have taken over control of the launch countdown. Should be wrapping up liquid oxygen loading on the second stage any second now.
Stage 2 LOX load is complete.
And there we go. With that call out, we are now fully loaded with RP1 and liquid oxygen. So next up is startup, and then after startup, inside of T-minus 2 seconds, we do light those Merlin M1D engines for liftoff. So far, the payload continues to be healthy. Falcon 9 team is tracking no issues on the rocket at this time. Should be
gas launch closeout.
There we go. Just sort of call out for gas launch closeouts. We are now venting just the residual propellant in those TE lines. You can see some larger white clouds forming there off the side of the TE as we vent some of that propellant. Again, coming up at T-minus 60 seconds, we will enter the startup phase.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
So with that, the Falcon 9's internal flight computers have now taken control of the launch countdown. We're just waiting for our final go from our launch director, and then we will be heading to space.
Launch directors go for launch.
Great news there. No blockers to liftoff. We should be lifting off in just around 35 seconds. So let's listen in for that.
T-minus 30 seconds. $15 seconds. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. And liftoff. Goes SpaceX, goes SiriusXM. Chamber pressures are nominal.
T-plus 30 seconds into flight. We're getting some beautiful views from the vehicle here. Falcon 9 has successfully lifted off from Launch Complex 39A. You can see
Power and telemetry are nominal.
Kennedy Space Center below the vehicle, and again we are carrying SXM-9 to orbit today. So you might notice the vehicle is tilting over horizontally, and this is
Falcon 9 is supersonic.
This is a maneuver known as a gravity turn. Coming up on max Q here in just a couple seconds.
Max Q.
There we go, we just passed through that moment of max Q. As I mentioned earlier, we are starting to head horizontally away from the launch pad. We're still going up, but we're also going sideways, essentially. And as you heard previously, we did just pass through max Q, which is a critical moment in flight because the combined stresses caused by Falcon 9 accelerating through the atmosphere, as well as the ambient static pressure, are at their greatest. And we did just hear that MVAC chill for Ascent has begun, just cooling down some of those engine components further in preparation for full flow of liquid oxygen. You can track our progress to orbit here by keeping an eye on that stage 1 telemetry in the bottom corner of your screen. Getting a great tracking shot from the ground here. You can see we're going over 5,000 kilometers per hour. Getting a nice view of the rocket's plume as we head up to the thinner parts of the Earth's atmosphere. Coming up next, we have a series of events. Those are main engine cutoff, followed by stage separation, second engine start 1, and then following that is fairing separation.
Main engine cutoff.
Stage separation confirmed.
MVAC ignition.
And there we go. So what you just saw was the shutdown of the 9 M1D engines, known as MECO. Following that, we separate the 2 stages, and then we do light the MVAC engine, which you're looking at now on your screen. Meanwhile, the first stage, you can now see on the left side of your screen, is going to flip its orientation in preparation to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere in an attempted landing on our drone ship out in the Atlantic Ocean. So as you can see with the MVAC engine lit on the right side of your screen, we're now accelerating our way into orbit. First stage on the left side of your screen is in a coast phase.
Fairing separation confirmed.
And there go those 2 fairing halves. We're now exposing the SXM-9 payload to the vacuum of space.
Stages are following nominal trajectories.
Great news there. Both stages are on their planned trajectory. You can see now in the telemetry for the first stage, we're starting to slow down as we reach the peak of the first stage's trajectory. You should start to see the altitude start to decrease as the vehicle heads back down towards Earth. Coming up next on the first stage is the entry burn. And for this burn, we do relight 3 of the M1D engines, starting with the center E9, followed shortly after that by the E1 and E5 engines. And this just slows the vehicle down as it passes back into the Earth's atmosphere, reducing stress and improving our reusability on the vehicle. During this entry burn, Falcon 9 is decelerating by firing its Merlin engines, but we're still moving really fast towards the Earth. And this causes the vehicle to fly through Merlin's exhaust gases, also sometimes called the plume. And this deposits a layer of soot on the vehicle's surface. So that's why you can see some of our flight-proven vehicles look a little extra toasty. And that soot comes from the carbon-based fuel that Falcon 9 uses. So that entry burn should start in just around a minute from now and typically lasts around 20 seconds. And again, the second stage on the right side of your screen, continuing to head to orbit, now almost 13,000 kilometers per hour at an altitude of about 160 kilometers above the surface of the Earth. We can see the first stage is now accelerating towards the Earth. Its altitude is decreasing. You can see those grid fins on the left side of your screen. These help aerodynamically control the vehicle as it re-enters the atmosphere. So pay attention to those. You can see them sort of tilting and guiding the vehicle as we head towards the drone ship.
Both stages continue to follow nominal trajectories.
Great news there. Everything still looking good for both stages. Coming up shortly on that entry burn, so pay attention to the left side of your screen as well as that telemetry.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
Stage 1 FTS is saved.
So we are now currently in the middle of the entry burn. You can see we are rapidly slowing down that first stage.
Entry burn shut down.
And there's the conclusion of that entry burn. And now, as I mentioned earlier, we perform this entry burn to slow the vehicle down and reduce the re-entry stresses. And this in turn increases our reusability of the vehicle. Of course, reusability is the key to lowering the cost of spaceflight, and that enables more investment into critical scientific research. The Falcon 9 first stage supporting today's mission has just performed that entry burn for the 19th time. The Merlins on this first stage are optimized for sea level, and they achieve about 190,000 pounds of thrust during ascent and descent. The MVAC engine on the right side of your screen is optimized to operate in the vacuum of space, and that engine produces just around
Stage 2 terminal guidance.
220,000 pounds of thrust in the vacuum. So we just heard stage 2 has entered terminal guidance, which means we are approaching the end of our
Stage 1
burn.
transonic.
Meanwhile, stage 1 has just gone below the speed of sound. We are now approaching the thicker parts of the Earth's atmosphere, getting ready for a landing on our drone ship. Second stage approaching its parking orbit. You can see those grid fins on the left now starting to help position the vehicle and guide it towards the ship. And
Stage 1 landing burn.
Stage 2 FTS is saved.
there we go. We
MVAC shutdown.
just heard the landing burn has started on the first stage. And as you can see, we're just passing through the clouds now, and there's the drone ship waiting in the ocean below.
Nominal orbit insertion.
Landing leg deploy. Stage 1 landing confirmed.
And there you have it. That landing marks SpaceX's 380th successful recovery of an orbital class rocket, including the first stage landings for both Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy. Now, this is a major milestone as well for Just Read the Instructions, which just fielded its 100th landing. And in the middle of that landing burn, we did hear that the MVAC engine successfully shut down, and we had a nominal orbital insertion. So with that confirmation, the second stage is now embarking on its coast phase. After this coast phase, we do relight that MVAC engine for a second time. That should happen around the T+26 minute mark. And following that will be payload deploy around the T+34 minute mark. So we're going to head into a quick break, but we'll see you back here in just around 15 minutes. And welcome back to the SXM-9 mission. So far, it's been a great mission. Falcon 9 lifted off at 11:10 a.m. Eastern Time from Launch Complex 39A at Kennedy Space Center in Florida. We did have a successful ascent, fairing separation, and second stage orbital insertion. Those fairing halves are being recovered by our recovery ship Bob. And again, one half of the fairing flew for the 5th time today. The other half flew for the 3rd time. And we did also recover the first stage on our drone ship, and this marks its 19th landing overall. As you can see on your screen, we are just moments away from the second ignition of the MVAC engine on the second stage. And this will carry the SXM-9 payload into the orbit needed to deploy the satellite. The burn will be followed by shutdown of the MVAC, also known as Second Engine Cutoff 2, or SECO 2. As you can see on your screen, we are now chilling the engine in preparation for that burn. The burn should happen in just around 30 seconds, and should be about a minute-long burn. Now again, we're currently in what's known as a parking orbit, which is a circular orbit. And today's mission is known as a geosynchronous transfer orbit mission. So that is what we are going to achieve after this burn here, coming up in a few seconds.
MVAC ignition.
There you go. As you can see, we did just light that MVAC engine. You can see in the telemetry, we are now rapidly increasing our speed. This burn should last just around a minute or so. And again, this takes us to a geosynchronous transfer orbit, which is the deploy orbit for the SXM-9 payload today.
MVAC shutdown.
We did just successfully shut that engine
Nominal
down.
orbit insertion.
And there's the call out for nominal orbit insertion. So with that second engine cutoff, or SECO 2, we're just a couple minutes away from payload deploy. So we will take one more short break for the final few minutes of coast here, and we'll see you back here in just around 4 minutes. Welcome back to the SXM-9 mission. We've had a great mission so far, and we're now just a couple minutes away from our expected payload deploy. As we mentioned earlier, our customer for today's mission is SiriusXM, and this is the third SiriusXM launch for SpaceX so far. SiriusXM's platforms collectively reach about 150 million listeners. The SXM-9 satellite is based on Maxar's proven 1300 class platform, and the satellite was built at Maxar's facility in Palo Alto, California. The satellite will provide more capability to the SiriusXM fleet, including an expanded service area and higher service quality. Beautiful day, beautiful views here from the second stage in orbit as we are preparing to deploy the SXM-9 satellite. SXM-9 is 27 feet tall and over 100 feet long when the solar arrays are deployed. The satellite also features a large unfurlable S-band reflector, and this broadcasts audio and data signals to users on the ground. As I mentioned, there are more than 150 million SiriusXM-equipped vehicles on the road today, and these rely on SiriusXM's proprietary satellite network, which is also a key delivery mechanism for the company's 360L platform. SiriusXM also offers a suite of satellite-delivered marine and aviation services, and these provide pilots and boaters with important weather data and information directly to their cockpits. Getting a great view of the payload here in space on your screen. As you can see, we are now in the deploy orbit, traveling over 32,000 kilometers per hour. You can see our altitude is also increasing. Should be coming up on that payload deploy in just around 30 seconds. Should hopefully get a good view of that deploy.
SiriusXM-9 payload deploy confirmed.
And there's that call out. And as you can see, the SXM-9 payload was just successfully deployed, now heading off into space for its mission. So with that, that will wrap up our coverage for today. Thank you all so much for joining us for SpaceX's 123rd successful launch of 2024. And
Payload deploy confirmed.
And as well as our 418th overall successful launch. All of us here at SpaceX want to give a big thank you to our customer, SiriusXM, for entrusting us with today's mission. We also want to give a shout out to the Eastern Range and Federal Aviation Administration for supporting today's launch. And of course, as always, thank you to you, all of our viewers, for tuning in and for your continued support. Remember to follow at SpaceX on X for launch updates. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you again soon.